Chapter 4 introduces the noun system. It's one of the two big systems really, the Greek verb system and then now the Greek noun system. Once again an encoded system, so we have to look at the inflection pattern. In Greek, the Greek spelling therefore indicates the sentence function, as Stevens here points out. So we have what we call the Greek cases. Noun function is declared by cases. In English we have cases as well, the nominative, the accusative and the genitive. We just don't readily recognize it as such. And the way we figured it out in sentences is in the old elementary school way, by asking the right questions. Who or what is doing an action? In Greek, it's simply just encoded. So Greek splits the object function into two distinct cases, accusative for direct object, but dative for indirect object. So that's actually a new one. Another new one is the vocative. So in short, we have 5 cases. Now you may run sometimes into a book that will talk about the 8-case system for Greek, and that's simply because the interior cases, the genitive and the dative, each then are divided up into 2 sub-cases. That's the only difference. It's not better or worse, it's just a different arrangement system. Okay, so the Greek cases consist of 5, the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the vocative. And so it's really important that you are very familiar with its functions. They decline according to a specific pattern, and we're first going to introduce what we call the second declension pattern. Okay, so it's what we call a vowel declension pattern. It's most consistent, so that's why we learn it first. It's a masculine feminine declension pattern, and so it ends in vowels. The first set is the declension set that we call masculine. Notice that we give it for the first 4 cases. We typically do not spend a whole lot of time on the vocative in the New Testament because we don't encounter it a whole lot. So we have the nominative case for the singular and for the plural, and so on and so forth. And so you have to learn this by memory, because you must recognize the code in order to know the function. It really is just like a secret language. Okay, so commit these to memory. The second set then will come up in just a minute here when we go at the neuter. Here you see an example of the vocative, like for the word logos. Logé and logoi would be the vocative. Notice that the gloss, the meaning, is here given in a capital form. It's capitalized, and that is because it would be direct address. But typically we leave this off. So the noun location is important here. Just like we located verbs, we can also locate nouns. We often call it parsing because it has a location, a place, which is its case, but it also has a gender and it has a number. So all of that we will need to know in order to know what kind of code we are talking about. We actually do have a feminine second declension. It's just fairly rare in the New Testament. So that means words like Parthenos, virgin, Hodos, way or road, Eremos, wilderness, and then some other ones like prophet and John are also irregular. And so you can kind of just simply just remember it with like funny sentences, like the virgin will find a way in the wilderness. Okay. As said, we also have a second set of second declension endings. We had the masculine, now we also have the neuter. It's somewhat similar because the interiors repeat. So the interiors are the genitive and the dative. So they are the same. So the only ones that are different are the nominative and accusative, and they themselves repeat. So that's also interesting. So that's, as Stephen says, good news. So he summarizes that as like little keys. The neuter interior cases replicate, and the neuter accusative replicate the neuter nominative. Okay, and so we also there see how that works. Now remember, we don't have articles yet. So when you give a glass, um, you may want to make sure that you know how to translate that. I typically like to see an indefinite article also preceding the nominative and the accusative. I think it's more appropriate here. Okay, we typically don't diagram anymore, but notice that the exercises really hone in on you knowing what the basic introductory matters are of the nouns, and then you practice it. So you practice adding these endings and then working out the cases there. Singular, plural, and remember that for the interior cases you have to give short phrases. So the phrases are an inherent part of your translation. As soon as you see kurion, see that? You see that ending, you know it's a genitive. That means that not only does it declare what the genitive is, but you have a short phrase, because the genitive indicates a sense of origin or relation. So you have to say of a lord, from a lord. Same for the dative. Is in, with, or by a lord. So you have to provide these short phrases. The nominative is going to be your subject nominative. It's always the head subject of the sentence. And then the accusative, that's your direct object. So when you start translating now, you have your task laid out for you. You can first look for your subject. And then because you know the verbs in basic form, you can next look for a verb. What is your subject going to do? And what is it going to do to what? So next you're going to need a direct object. And sure enough, you know that because there's the accusative, and you can recognize it because you know the code. And along with that, you know if there's any kind of prepositional phrase, you can find it. Do you see a genitive or do you see a dative? Okay, so once you know this chapter, you can actually do basic translation.